Hello, my name is Mark Francis, and I am here for the Royal Voluntary Service in the Virtual Village Hall. And who knew a Virtual Village Hall even existed? I mean, it's fabulous. I didn't, and here we are in our own little living rooms. Now, I'm here to talk about a few little things about men's health, and in particular, my own journey on men's mental health, and particularly my own mental health journey. And a bit of sewing, because for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Francis, and I was on the Great British Sewing Bee in 2020 for Series 6. And that has led me to completely turn around my life in what I do and the things I enjoy. And it's just been a fabulous journey since. And one I have been sharing, but what I haven't shared so much is about mental health. It's a bit of an odd one to talk about. It's one that's important to talk about, and one that I don't really or nearly talk about as much as I should do. I mean, when I'm doing my talks for the Sewing Bee, people want to hear about the Sewing Bee. They're not there to hear about my mental health journey, although it does pop into it from time to time. But for those who don't know much about me, my name, my name, I said it twice now already. I was brought up and where I still live today in a town called Kenilworth in Warwickshire. My dad is still alive, my mum has sadly passed away, and I have 3 siblings. So there's 2 boys and 2 girls. Mum had the full set, you could say. Sewing didn't enter as part of my life at all until I was about 40, really. So up until then, I'd done a tiny bit of sewing at school, but as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, the sewing that we do at school, or at least it was when I was at school in the 80s, was abysmal. I think could possibly be the word. Yes, I think abysmal is the word. And it's not the teacher's fault. She was thrown 40 children all at the same time and expected to teach them sewing, cooking and nutrition, or whatever classroom things they were doing all at the same time. I mean, it was just never going to land. It really wasn't ever going to land. But she did her best, bless her. But there's something in there, I don't know, I quite like doing the sewing, and the cooking was fun, but I quite like the sewing. But it was just kind of throw you at a machine. If you don't know how to use it, then just go and find someone and ask them. That's as much as the teaching that there was for the sewing. But creativity has always been a massive part of my life. As a child, I was always, and I think I probably am really quite sensitive, probably a lot more than people think I am, and quite often a lot more than I think I am myself, really. And I always have done, sort of thought a lot about things and what people think about me, and when I probably shouldn't. And it doesn't really matter. You know, the stuff that goes round in your head for quite some time. But really, when you think about it, probably no one else is worried about what's just happened or what's just been said or hasn't said or what may or may not have happened. But sensitivity is always something that's been part of my nature, I think. Which ties in with kind quiet. I think I'm quite quiet, which might quite surprise you. So those people see me on the Bee, or if you've watched me on Sewing Street since then, or other things that I've done. I used to be said that, oh, you hear your mum and dad go, oh, he's shy. I don't think I was shy. I think I was quiet, and I think there's a difference between the two. You can be quiet, doesn't mean you're shy. Although the things you do in your job can help you overcome this. I worked for a bank for a really long time, probably much longer than I should have done or wish I had done. But you do get used to things like talking to complete strangers who come into the bank, ringing up people and just announcing who you are. And that's a big skill. And that's been able to feed into the stuff I've done since then. As you heard, I'm one of 4. When I was a kid, there was mum and dad, there was us 4 kids, loads of chickens, dogs, and my grandpa lived with us as well. My mum thought this was a good idea at the time, as it was her dad, but really, I think she bitterly regretted having her father move back in with her after so many years of living as a family unit ourselves. Us kids thought this was fantastic, having grandpa on tap 24/7, but I don't think she did. But it's just down to fa family dynamics and relationships. I think that's a whole other video. Um, but it did mean the house was very busy. But there's a big difference between the relationship that I had with my siblings and that mum had with us, because mum and dad are both only children. In fact, there's quite a lot of only children in our family, and I'm not, of course. So mum never really understood the dynamic of how it works with siblings, how we kind of connect and communicate, particularly when we're children, more so than when we're adults. And finding a quiet time in the house is quite difficult sometimes. And so I always quite liked having time to myself, time on my own, quiet time, because there's lots of time to play with my sister. But there was a big event in my childhood that probably shaped quite a lot of me and my adulthood and where I am now, and that is the death of my grandma. The reason that grandpa lived with us in the first place, because following grandma's death, I mean, we're talking a long time ago, we're talking 1981. I was only 4 years old, but I do remember her really clearly. I remember playing with her and all these lovely memories, although they're not very many of them, I do remember them. And she, for some reason, she loved boys more than little girls. Don't know why. She was always disappointed she only had a daughter, but that's the luck of the draw, isn't it? She wishes she'd had a boy, but she didn't. Maybe if she had more, she would have had a boy. We'll never know now. But the death of grandma at when I was only 4 had quite a shock on me from what I've been told. I know I didn't speak for quite a long time. Apparently my teacher at school came out to mum in the playground and said after about 6 months that, I mean, she knew what had happened, but I hadn't said anything to her. I was only 4 or 5. And she was very surprised when I told her that my grandma had died, but she'd actually died 6 months before, and it's the first time I've spoken in a long time. And it had, yeah, quite a profound shock. I wanted to know if I could phone grandma, which is a very sweet, childlike thought to be able to do. But and it seems such a simple request, but I'd seen my mum on the phone all the time. I can remember her voice and hearing her laugh down the phone as a child. But why couldn't I phone my grandma? Surely she was just in the next room. There's lovely poems about being in the next room, and it is true, but there's no phone line there, unfortunately. Creativity was a big saver in my early years. Music, particularly at a very young age. At the age of 7, I wanted to play the piano. My teacher at school was a music teacher. He taught piano into people. He went to people's homes to do this. And he thought I would be shocking, as I was shocking at school, and a terrible pupil. Maths and English were really not my strong point. I really struggled all through education in general, really. I always felt like I was a few years behind, probably, looking back at it, in my ability. But you kind of swept along with the system, because it says you do your GCSEs at this point in your life, and your A levels and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes people just aren't ready. It's that cartoon we see where we measure everybody by the same standards, but yet we all have our own personal journeys that we go on. So music was a big thing. I learned the piano at the age of 7. I still play it today. It's just the other side of this camera, actually. And up until the coronavirus and the lockdown, I was playing regularly at restaurants and weddings and all kinds of stuff. Drawing, I always loved art. I'm not necessarily very good at it, but art was a great outlet for me. And imaginative play with my sister, who's only 3 years younger than me. And I hope children these days, I don't have children in my life, but I hope they still do imaginative play. But the thing that really I needed and I had at that young age was mum. Mum was fantastic. fantastic. I think she saw in me what she was herself as a young child, struggling with education, struggling to be able to cope and to keep up, particularly with those core standards of maths and English, particularly those two. And so she educated me at home as well as being in mainstream school. And so she was always looking out for new books that I could work through, and she would sit down with me and do this. And I believe if she hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have had the life that I've had now. Surprisingly, I ended up working at a bank. I know, there's a creative child, he struggled with his education, and he ends up in a bank. It's bizarre, isn't it? Before that, I was working at Summerfield. Remember Summerfield? We can't work there anymore, but if you could, don't, because they were terrible employers. They really were. They're gone now. They're dead and buried as an organisation. But they were terrible. And this job came along, very vague, in the newspaper, as it was at the time. It just said customer service roles. So I applied for it, and it turned out it was in a bank, and I kind of bummed and ahed a bit. And Mum said to me, her exact words were, "You might as well do it until you know what you want to do." And I thought, well, that seems pretty reasonable to me, frankly. So I did it. It was a little bit more money, not as much as I thought. Be patient with bank staff, because they really are not on as much money as you might think they are. They really are not. It's not minimum wage, it's more than that, but you know, for what they do, they're not paid very much. These are not London bankers. And I kind of tootled along. I've never been, for a number of years, I've never been, and I'm still not, particularly career-minded. I've never driven in the bank. I didn't want to be a bank manager, or I didn't want to progress through the ranks. I didn't see myself as ever being there. But I am also a man of, or person of routine, very much routine. It's a big part of my who I am. Even as a child, I think part of it probably stems from, everything stems from being a child, but Mum would like to cook the same dinners every day of the week. And she said it's because my dad liked to know what dinner he was getting. But I think it's also easier for her. If I have fish and mash on a Tuesday, I'm really happy. And sausages on a Thursday, that kind of thing. But this routine of going to work, and you just do it. And before I left, I'd been there for 21 years. I didn't really know how that had happened. I'd gone from being young and naive to sort of old and naive and grey, and we're over 20 years and hadn't really realised it. And for the first kind of 10 years plus, I kind of potted along. The bank used to have staff opinion surveys as heavily weighted in their own favour as they were. One of the questions was always, do you experience stress in your role? And I always put somewhere, sort of an answer somewhere in the middle, that essentially I did. It was stressful from time to time, but I dealt with it. It was fine. I moved on. I didn't think about it. And it didn't affect me. I then got moved to another branch, which I didn't really want to do, to a role which should have been a promotion, but they didn't have the budget to pay me, and I wasn't given much choice but to do it. So I was doing this account manager role at a higher rank without having any extra remuneration, but all the extra responsibility for it. And the team of cashiers I had was not good. I'd been there 10 years plus. It was my job. These were, for want of a better, they were in their late teens, early 20s. They were not going to be there. They didn't really have a career in the bank because they didn't want one, and that's fine. But this was on my watch, and they weren't particularly good or well trained. So unfortunately, I started to get the thumbscrews put on me by the bank because the team weren't performing. This is about 2012, from what I remember. And this kind of pressure was slowly being wound up, and they kept putting more responsibility on what I should be doing in my day-to-day role in order to earn my keep, if you like. And I kind of kept all this in here. Inside, I didn't talk about anything at all, and it kind of built up. But I would come home and I would try to switch off from it. Just leave it, park it at the door, leave it there, and don't think about it. And then I'd have a nice evening, or try to do it the best I could. But then the bank has this horrible term, or at least they used to when I was there. They would call you a serial underperformer. They'd hang that label on you. They'd even tell you this in your end of year review. Said, oh, well, unfortunately, Mark, you are now a serial underperformer, so we're going to have to put you on a performance review. The support I had in that was terrible, and it was a tick box exercise. It really was, and I hadn't experienced anything like this before. I didn't really know how to deal with it. I probably should have spoken to the union, I don't know, or found something else to be doing. But I'm not one to give up. You see, I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm not one to give up. And it wasn't until I remember we were walking around. We've got a beautiful ruined castle here in Kenilworth, and I was having a walk around there with the dogs and Clive, my husband, and he knew something wasn't right, and I'd been under this pressure for probably about a year, all work related, and I told him everything that was going on, that my job was at risk, that they'd labelled me a serial underperformer, that their idea of supporting me was to give me a weekly one-to-one and just to tell me what I need to do without actually giving me any tools, or looking at things from my point of view as well. My manager at the time used to talk a lot about the fact that she had had 18 months off with work-related stress, and before she came back to work at the bank again, and that, you know, it had terrible trauma and all the rest of it. So you would think that she would have had an understanding of what I was going through, a recognition of what she was seeing in a member of her staff, but she did not, unfortunately. And it was a mere tick box exercise. They used to have, and this came quite a number of times over the years, I was told that if member staff is not performing, it's because they either have a lack of will or a lack of skill. She then followed this up with, I know it's not a lack of skill, so it must be your will, and why don't you want to work? And that was how it was. That was her point of view. It was, and it's hard to navigate or know what to do, but because of my character and who I am, and because I'm a man probably, and because we're British, I didn't talk about any of this, and until Clive sort of pulled it from me. He wanted me to go to the doctors. I spoke to my mum, she was alive at this point, and she said, no, don't let them give you any pills, and don't let them give you any time off. And I thought, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll bear that in mind. So Clive, it was still a number of weeks I wouldn't go to the doctor. I wouldn't make that call, because going to the doctor is letting it in. It's acknowledging that you do have an awful lot of stress and what was becoming depression and anxiety building up in me, and I didn't know what to do about it, but I didn't want to let it in, and going to the doctors was letting it in. Clive, in the end, booked the appointment. He went down, he took me down, and he took me in, and he went in with me, and I sort of put all of this stuff out to the doctor. And what he wanted to do was sign me off and give me pills, which I did do. I mean, I'm not sure what else in the moment they could do. They signed me off for a week, and then another week, and then eventually it ended up being 3 months I was off for over a period of time. My boss continued to be completely unsupportive, and that rather than sympathising with me and listening to what the doctor had told me, which I imparted, and the sick note, which specified that I was clearly signed off with work-related stress, depression, and anxiety, she still wanted me to phone up on a regular basis. She wanted me to check in with her, to tell them whether I'm going to be off or not, to contacting work, and how it was letting the team down, all this kind of stuff, for me not to be there, and that they need me. I tried not to speak to her as much as I could at all. In fact, I used to throw Clive at this because he's quite good at that, and being the absolute. And I tried to find another word to describe him, but the absolute rock and pillar that he is meant that I could trust him and have him there to be able to help me. Because it wasn't coming from anywhere else. The doctors were doing what they could, and Clive was as well. But in terms of work, who were appalling and continued to be for the rest of my time when I was at the bank, apart from one boss. But we'll come to her. When it was decided, when I felt I was coming okay to go back, they did one more pulling of the rug, unfortunately, and I was phoned by my boss on the Sunday before I was due to go back on the Monday, and again, it's funny how these words sometimes just get etched into your mind. And she said to me, "We've had a meeting about you, and we have decided what is best for you. This is a meeting without reference to me or my doctor, or Clive or anybody else who might know what I've been doing or what I've been like for the last 3 months." And that kind of set me back for another, I think 2, 3, 4 weeks. I can't quite remember now. In the end, the thing they decided was to send me to Stratford branch. And what the joke of it is, when I didn't go in on the Monday because I didn't feel capable after the way she dealt with that news, in terms of someone who's been off work with work-related stress, depression and anxiety, was that I didn't go in. The funny thing is, Stratford branch thought I was still Leamington. Leamington thought I'd gone to Stratford, so no one was missing me. I just wasn't at work, even though I'd communicated it to them. The effects of this have and continue to reverberate through my life, even today. Even talking about it now is making me feel kind of anxious. It's kind of bringing up those emotions, that anger that is so hard to deal with still after 10 years since this incident first happened. I find it very hard to go outside, to go to the shops. I couldn't face doing any work. I didn't really want to leave the house, but I did. I was very low, very quiet. We had, which I don't know whether it helped or not. It probably didn't. We had a lodger at the time. A long story that doesn't really important to this video, but he was staying with us for at that particular time. And so there's someone in the house who we kind of knew but didn't know terribly well, and it was someone who we could trust, but we'd offered some space for a few weeks while they were in the country. This kind of friend of someone, and I was in this terrible headspace. I couldn't talk about work without, or how I was even feeling or going through, without breaking down all the time. And I had this guy here who didn't really know me at all, and I don't know what sympathy he had. I think he was quite sympathetic, but it was tough to have that other face there. I don't know whether it helped or not, having someone else there. I couldn't talk to him about it. I couldn't talk to anybody, and I was just slumped on the sofa a lot of the time, not realising that it was probably the worst thing to do. I know the doctor said, get out, do things, exercise, whatever it might be, go for walks. But it's just so easy to sit on the sofa, to put the telly on, and just to sit there. And that probably lengthened my recovery, because I didn't feel I could do anything. I'm a man of routine, as I said earlier, so I would get up and get dressed, but even that was difficult. I did have a referral in the end to the IACT service, which is increasing access to psychological therapies. You probably got one where you live, or something similar. It may have a different name. And they did offer me help. I had various courses from them over the years to go on. Unfortunately, it's all very slow, which isn't the fault of the people running it, but probably more a fault of the service and the stress that's put on it. But the first thing they put me on was a mindfulness course. Now, I was off from February. I didn't get to go on this course until May, by which point I was back at work. So I wasn't in the moment. I wasn't. I was at a point where I was okay to be at work, but not quite right still, I realise now. But it always came, the help from the IAP service, just a few months too late, a few months down the line of where I really, really needed it after the trauma. We had to do a survey. I had to do a survey for this, kind of scoring things from 1 to 10 and good to bad, and where you are on a scale of how you feel. Some of you may have actually done this already yourself. And there was one of the questions about suicide that did come up, which I hadn't told all my thoughts to Clive, because it's difficult. Even today, I find it very difficult to talk to people about what happened then, what I go through now. And I had thought about not being here. I think I'm sure some of you might understand. It's not about ending my life, about finding some way to kill myself. It's not about jumping off a roof or whatever it might be. It's about not wanting to be here, to not be present anymore, needing to be wiped out or just removed, deleted. That's the feeling that I had, and that was. I answered it by not actually answering it in a way to Clive initially, because I couldn't answer it, because he was going, well, suicide, and I already haven't had any of that, have you? And I started to tear up, and then so did Clive. That's the bit that was probably most upsetting about everything for me and for Clive in particular. But I got better. I did get better, but it doesn't stay up. I thought I'd go through this period of feeling very low and depressed. I would then come out the other side, and the pills would stop, which they did, and I would be fine again. I didn't realise that I would be dealing with this, the effects of what happened, for the next 10 years, and still do to this day. At Stratford branch, I had another boss at the bank there. They changed quite regularly, at least they did back then, who was brilliant. When my mum died in 2014, she was brilliant. She said, take as much time off as you need. I don't want to hear from you until you're ready to come back. She would occasionally touch base, but it was only to see if I'm okay. There was never any pressure to come back. If there was times at work when I was getting angry or not as calm as I should be, or not in the right headspace, then she would say, I need to go home. I need to, in a good way, not kind of you need to go home, but in a kind of you need some time off. You need to go and rest and just take some time out for yourself. And she was brilliant. But it kept coming around. But unfortunately, when she wasn't there, she was on holiday because she had health herself issues, and then other people didn't deal with it. It was an epidemic problem with the bank that they don't seem to know how to deal with mental health issues. I read something somewhere that I quite liked the description of, and it was this: pieces of emotional shrapnel. That kind of sits in my head and kind of makes me, I don't know, it's quite how I feel, I suppose. The depression came back. It has done a couple of times, and work-related stress in particular. I was very low after Mum died, but then you might expect someone to be. I ended up back at the other branch, where I had the first stress depression episode with the same boss, and after a couple of years, the same feelings and thoughts and process was going on, having not experienced it for a few years. So I did end up having exactly the same repeat, but this time the difference being that I was also doing the Great British Sewing Bee at the same time. After I finished the sewing, because during the filming process I was doing, at that point there was no bubbles, no COVID, nothing like that, so we were doing a couple of days filming, a couple of days back at work for me, and I kind of ping pong between the two worlds, filming and the bank. After I finished, I was in 8 episodes, so it's quite a period that was, sort of 6 weeks or something along those lines. I was very low and very down afterwards, and hadn't been having a great time. It was the same story at work. I was a serial underperformer. My work wasn't good. It was a will. I was deliberately, according to the bank, not choosing to work or perform as they wanted me to, and the support was very tick boxy and exceptionally poor. And my boss said to me, and again these are words etched in my mind, she said to me afterwards, "I let you do Sewing Bee," she said, "because I thought it would make you happier at work." That's what she said, and that made me really angry. She let me do Sewing Bee. It didn't make me happier at work. It actually had the complete opposite effect, because I'd been 21 years in the bank, and the last 10 years hadn't been particularly brilliant, sort of emotionally or work-wise, but I was kind of felt stuck there. I felt trapped, not able to move on, didn't know what else I could do work-wise. I felt kind of institutionalized there, and I was very low about it. And then the Sewing Bee came along, and I was very lucky that I got to experience it, and for quite a number of weeks as well. Exceptionally lucky, because it meant I could go to another place of work. Now, let's be clear, as contestants, we don't get paid for this, but everybody around us, it was their job. It was their job. Some people, it's their job. All they do is make Sewing Bee all year round. Other people are crew that come and go to different productions. And it made me realise that these people, I could see they're really passionate. They cared about it. They enjoyed their job from what I could see. No one seemed to be a serial underperformer or under review or anything along those lines. And it was a joy to go and do it, to go down there and to do this job, if you like. And then I came back to the bank, and I'd sit there and I'd think, nobody cares here, do they? Nobody cares. If I wasn't doing this, they'd just get someone else. I'm just a number. I'm not important. I'm not important. So the filming finished in October. I've gone off sick with work-related stress, and so on in mid-November. I handed my notice in 2 weeks later, and I left by the end of the year. Now, because I'm a musician, I did tend to offer for a number of years to go and play Christmas carols in the banking hall during Christmas, usually just for one day on the last, before we closed before Christmas. It was always very lovely, and I always offered it to various bosses, and I didn't do it that year. because I was signed off sick. I was with work-related depression and stress and so on. And I had a phone call from my boss saying, "Are you going to come in and still play the piano in the bank? It'll be a lot of fun. We'd love to see you." I mean, you can't credit it that she thought it was appropriate to sit there and phone me and I'd say, "But you know, I know you're off with work-related stress, but come on in anyway. It'll be fun." It's just appalling. It really was. It made me really angry and even more determined that I'd made the right decision to leave. There was a point during the filming. Now, as you know, with Sewing Bee, they do tend to put lots of tears, lots of anxiety into it. Not anxiety, lots of, drama if it happens. Now, I did have a drama in there, but it didn't go in. There were tears from me, but not tears from the production. They were brilliant. I'd had one such meeting with this same boss on a Thursday, I remember, and because of the travel schedule and the filming, I'd gone straight from work. Clive picked me up, driven me straight to the train station, on the train to London for the hotel overnight, start work on the Sewing Bee at sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock the next morning. So I had no time to offload anything. I'd had a 2-hour meeting with my boss, and it was just appalling. It was awful, and all the stuff I'd previously been discussing. But I couldn't offload any of this, and I was trying not to bring it into the Sewing Bee. I was trying not to talk about it again, and it never works. It really doesn't work because it kind of spilled over. I phoned Clive during one of the filming breaks after the pattern challenge. He asked me how I was, and I was chatting. I was very quiet, and he asked me what was wrong. So I told him what happened at work, and then I just couldn't stop crying after that. I just couldn't stop crying. But the Sewing Bee were brilliant. The producer, they paused filming of the transformation challenge because it's all filmed in the right order, and until I was composed again, because it wasn't actually part of what I was doing. And I remember being in the studio hanging around. I got to a point, I thought, now I'm okay, let's carry on, I can do this. And Patrick said to me, probably seen I'd been upset and been crying, and he said, are you okay, Mark? And I just started crying again. But I needed to be there, that they were the support people that I needed. They had the support that I wish I'd had at the bank. Yes, pieces of emotional shrapnel, this kind of stuff embeds itself. It gets inside you. It still returns. I've been feeling a bit low lately, and I still find it hard to deal with. I still find that people don't understand, they don't recognize it, and what we can do is to, if you're someone that's experienced it, is to talk about it, to share your story, to be there, to listen. You don't need to have answers, you don't need to have advice, you don't need to tell someone what to do to feel happier. You just need to listen and take it in. And if you want to say anything, I suppose the best way is to reflect back what they're saying. You're not looking for answers when you're trying to share stuff. It's about getting it off here, through here, and out. I find it very difficult. I still find it very difficult. I don't know quite how to put it into words. I don't know how to express it. I don't know how to put it together so that even I understand myself, or certainly making other people understand is very difficult. I'm still on. I'm still on medication. I'm sure some of you are familiar with citalopram. I hate it. I don't want to take them, but they're doing a job, and that's what they're there for. It's like this thing. It's like a daily reminder, taking them. I call them my crazy pills, which probably isn't very helpful. But it's like this. It's part of a reminder, a shadow that kind of follows you around. I didn't think I would ever have to deal with this. I didn't think it was part of me or who I was. I knew I was quite sensitive and quiet sometimes, but I didn't think this kind of depression, anxiety, stress would affect me and for so much of my life as well. And it's probably difficult to think that I'll probably always have to deal with it. That's the thing that I find most tough. I hope I don't, but I'm prepared for the fact that I probably always will. I went to, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago, I lose track, an aunt's funeral. She wasn't terribly old, but my great aunt was there, who I hadn't seen for a long time. She hadn't seen me since I was a kid, but we knew each other straight away. She said to me, said, "Oh, you're just like your," she said, "you're just like my father," and who I never knew. It's, you know, my great grandfather. And I said, "Oh, really? How is that?" And she said, "Oh, it's just everything about you. It's, you know, the way you talk, the way you walk, the things you do, your personality, the way you carry yourself." I've spoken to people about her brother, my grandfather, and I think it's something that probably is just part of the family. I don't know whether this kind of behaviour is inherent in a family line, but I think there's quite a few men in our family who have suffered with similar similar things to me. I don't think I'm the only one, which in a way is that a comfort. I'm not sure. It's interesting, certainly, if I'm not the only one of a family line that's dealt with similar kind of things. But what now? I fight on. Is it a fight? I think it is. Sometimes it's a fight. Sometimes it's not. I've just been away on holiday. I hope you noticed the tan, and I don't tan very much. Not like the husband, but that's nice. It's nice to be able to go away and do those things, and it's important. This is where it leads into the sewing. It's important to have those things that you can do that help you take your mind off other things, the things that might be getting you down, upsetting you, and making you feel anxious or depressed, whatever it might be. For me, there's several things: music, there's sewing, there's lots of other things. I love, as I'm sure lots of you who see me talk and do things, I love Doctor Who, the TV programs, and that's a big escapism for me as well. And having that escapism is important. I'm not going to sit here and give you advice if you're suffering with depression or stress or anxiety, because it's a very personal journey, and you'll know, hopefully, the things you can do. But I think for me, it's being able to step away from what's going on up here, to fill it with something else. Fill it with something else that can occupy the space that would otherwise be eaten up with the things that get you down, whether it's work or family or whatever it might be. Make something. Making something is such a beautiful craft, whether it's sewing or woodwork or metalwork or, I don't know, building a house. I don't know, whatever it might be. Making something is such a beautiful thing to do. And for me, having a piece of fabric and a pattern and working through the engineering problem that is making a garment is just a beautiful thing to do. I can help by sharing my story. As emotionally difficult as this is, I do feel quite drained, quite it's all fluffing around in my head now, and I need to let it calm down after I finish this. But we're doing a bit of sewing in a few minutes if you wanted to join in. And it's important to talk, even though it's difficult. And switching off from things, just everything. We have increasingly busy lives. Work, we have phones and tablets and other devices that fill our lives as well. So it's ever more important to be bored, to relax, to just sit in a chair with a drink, have a cup of tea or a squash. That is squash, not gin and tonic or anything like that, I can assure you. And just to relax and do nothing. Let your mind empty. Just look at the people walking past your house. Sit in the park on a bench. Just be bored and don't feel worried that you're not doing something. Fill your mind. Oh, I've written, fill your mind with good things. Fill your mind with good things. Should we do a bit of something happy? Should we do a bit of sewing? Now, if you've not sewn before, because I'm very passionate about people sewing, particularly if you're a man, because there's a lot of women that sew and that's brilliant, but there's a lot of men who would love it. I really do believe that. And there's a lot of things you can do to get out there and get sewing if you want to. Think of it as an engineering. It's engineering with fabric. That's what it is. I think men quite like that when they realise it's not just sewing bits together. You're actually solving an engineering problem, following instructions. Your local haberdashery may have courses, or they'll know someone that does them. And there might be some. That's how I started doing an introduction to sewing course with a local business in Stratford upon Avon. And I've got some things I made here. Actually, I'll just grab them, because they're things that I'm very proud of, and some things that I still use to this day if I can get hold of them all. Here we go. So the first thing I made was a cushion with a nice moustache appliqued on the front, and on the back some buttons. And it's just a nice simple project, and that's the first thing that gets you going. Then we made a bag. These are all the kind of things you can start with. A bag that's lined, take it to the beach, shopping, whatever you want to do, and a pencil case. And these are projects I still teach to beginners today because they're all so good. But we're going to do a little bit of sewing. So hopefully you can see what I'm going to do. So we'll start by, now there's a few things you can do. Now, fast fashion is everywhere. Whether it'll be here tomorrow, I don't know, but it's everywhere at the moment. But what we can do is look after our clothes. So Vivienne Westwood, and I'm not suggesting you have to go and buy Vivienne Westwood, but there's something she says is buy better, buy less. So, and that's a lovely thing to do, I think, is to buy better clothes and look after them. Or fast fashion, that's fine, but look after them. Think about the journey they've been on to get to your take my glasses off for this, to get to your wardrobe. So we'll start with a needle and thread. It may not focus very well that close. You can get basic sewing kits. Patrick Grant has just done one actually, which is released in Aldi stores. And it does have all the basic kit. I don't know whether it's still in there. Hopefully it is. It's in a little box. I think it's about a tenner, but it's got some nice scissors and bits and pieces in there, needle and thread, and a little booklet on how to do basic mending. So let's start with threading a needle. Get yourself some thread. I've got some thread here. You can pick these up quite cheaply. Most threads are polyester these days, but you can get cotton ones as well. Now cut it nice and cleanly. Cut it nice and cleanly at the end. If you see any fluff, that might get in the way of threading it. And I'm just going to look. The light helps. And you just push it through and out the other side. You can get devices to help. There's little things you can shove the needle in and it pulls the thread through automatically. So you can do those as well if you wish. Now let's just I'll just do a little bit of a hem. So something that men have is their trouser hems fall down all the time. I've noticed it. One of my old bosses at the bank, who was actually very nice, one of the few, his trouser hem was always falling down, and he would use Bonder web to iron and tap it. We had a big gooey mess. I mean, and it would be washed and washed and washed, and it'd fall down again. Whereas if you just sewn it, it wouldn't fall down at all. So I've just mocked up a trouser hem just with this scrap of fabric. I don't know whether I'm quite the right way around for this. What I'm going to do, now you will pick a cotton that matches the outside of your fabric. I'm using blue so you can see it a bit better hopefully, but do pick something that you can see. So what we're going to do is just pick up on this is on the inside of your trouser. Oh, let me come across a bit. There we go. Just pick up a tiny bit of fabric. Now you're only picking up a few strands. That's all you're doing, just a few little strands of fabric. And then I'll just go around it again and hope that should hold it. So that's all I've done so far, is just put one little stitch in there. And then I'm going to work from left to right, and I'm now going to, it doesn't matter so much if on the inside, I'm just going to pick up one little thread of fabric again, and I'm just going to keep zigzagging between. Can you see that building? Hopefully you can see that, and it's forming a zigzag between the fabric of the trouser and the turn up on the inside. And all I'm doing is I'm just pulling just a few tiny threads. You want these threads to be delicate, these stitches to be delicate and neat, if possible. It is on the inside though. So hopefully you can see there's a little zigzag appearing, and that will be enough to hold your trousers up, the trouser hem. And on the outside, now you can't really see it. There are some little blue dots, but that's just where it sits on the trouser itself. But if you're using thread that matches the outside of your trouser, you won't see that at all. If you're feeling fancy, you can do this on a sewing machine. You can, there are special stitches on the sewing machine that will do that. And you just go round and round till you get back to the beginning, zigzagging between the trouser itself and the turn up on the inside. And that will hem your trousers. You can do similar things with the slip stitch, but do them about 1 centimetre and apart, and then it's nice and neat. The other thing I want to show you, just to give you a bit of inspiration, is sewing a button on. Nice and simple task. So if I get in the right position again. So I'm just going to do one stitch and then a second stitch directly over the top of it, like that. So that should hopefully anchor it. Now there are several ways to sew a button on. I've just picked a nice big one, so it's easy for me to hold, and so that it's visible for you. This is my favourite way of doing it. Now I'm going to hold that button. Hang on. Let me turn this upside down so you can see it better. Oh no, my needle's unthreaded. I'm going to hold that button in place, and then I'm going to sew it all from the same side. But what you can do is just go up and down through the fabric as well. That's a nice easy way as well. And you just keep going over and over it until you come to the end. So what I'm going to do is just keep going from that same point. Now I put my needle through the fabric and then through one of the holes on the button. Now this button's got 4 holes, yours might only have 2. And then I'm going to go back. I was just doing this with an overhead camera for you. Then you go back down the opposite hole, and then on the same side, you don't need to go to the side of the fabric, you just find where that stitch is on your fabric again. I go back through the first hole and then back through the opposite hole to the other side, and hopefully that will all work out. And you just keep doing that, and then you switch to the opposite 2 holes, and then you have your button sewn on. Those are just a couple of things. You can get books on mending, but look out for Patrick Grant's kit in Aldi. Other kits are available, of course. Put my glasses back on so I can see you better. And that has some, if you get that particular one, it has a little booklet of mending in there as well. But look out for local courses in haberdasheries and local sewing schools. Or if you want to see where I am, then you can check out my website as well, which was on the beginning, at the bottom of the screen at the beginning. If you do have any questions, you can pop them into the chat box, and you can ask me a question if you wanted to. Otherwise, you can watch this if you're watching this later on, and you can send me a message personally if you wanted to. Or comment on any of my posts, because I'll be sharing this video once it's up on my social medias. So thank you all for listening. I hope some of you have found what I've said interesting and maybe some comfort in it. You're really not alone. If you're someone that's struggling with this, you're really not alone. I'm not a counsellor, but if you did want to chat, I'll do my best. But find someone as well that you can sit down with and laugh and cry and get it all out, because that will probably be the hardest, most difficult, and the best thing you can possibly do. So thank you all for watching. It's nearly at the end of the hour, so we'll leave it there. And if there's anything else you want to learn about sewing, then do drop me a message as well, and I can see if I can help you or point you in the right direction of some of the places, or look locally as well. So thank you so much for watching, and my social media, if you wanted to follow me, is at @SewMarkFrancis, and you can see my website www.sewmarkfrancis.com. You can see me next on Sewing Street on the 2nd of July. So thank you so much, and I believe there's a host somewhere who will pop up in a minute, but I think that is me. So